Market's absolutely wild this morning. Let's go ahead and start with this one, put it up there on the screen. Exactly 12 hours, President Trump has now intervened after a warning that was issued about potential market fallout that would have happened without a Trump taco. Yesterday, they posted that oil prices were no longer the biggest threat to the markets, increasingly clear that bond markets will dictate how President Trump can continue increased pressure in the Iran war. As of 4:30 a.m. ET this morning, the bond market was, quote, now more broken than the energy market situation. The 10-year note yield had hit 4.45%. President Trump had the same conversation as he did April 9, 2025, when he had paused tariffs for 90 days. Remember all the whole bond market conversation that we had last year. 3 hours later, he postpones all strikes on Iranian power plants. 30 minutes later, Iran denies. The 10-year yield briefly collapsed before rebounding back to 4.38%. Now a clear attempt by the U.S. to contain brewing bond market prices, which obviously affects all of the debt. It affects mortgage rates, has huge impact on everything. The bond crisis and reaction that happened after the after the Liberation Day War, that clearly had a major impact on his thinking. Go to the next one, please. We can put this one up there on the screen as we see now. As seen in April 2025, this is what his prediction was as of very early this morning, that President Trump would have to intervene very, very soon. Could explain the taco. Don't forget that there are also all of these crazy things happening with the oil markets. So again, as of this morning, there was a large plunge. We remain around 9% down for Brent crude oil futures from the high that they opened on last night. However, at one point they were down like 14%, and they erased like half of that because of the Iranian denial that negotiations were happening. So something to keep an eye on. I mean, it's still at nearly $100 a barrel. Like, let's not pretend.
Yeah, 90 bucks a barrel is not a great place to be in. But
we're about 90 for West Texas, so that's still, I mean, if this lasts a couple of days, you will likely see a reduction. I think that's the analysis I saw in gas. You will probably see it return to like 350, something like that. It depends on how the individual operators are. I'm talking about the national price average. Don't know about the individual states. But clearly, this was bubbling up at the population level, as it should. People are furious. Good example of that was the UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, who took to a CNN town hall, and a younger voter confronted him over gas prices.
Hey guys, welcome back to the SpinCycle, and subscribe if you're new. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in bonds, but I do know when the bond goes up, the bond yield goes up, that means our debt goes up. Our $39 trillion in debt the country's in right now, and expanding rapidly with Trump's war. 90% of the country, other than MAGA, is against this war. MAGA's just going to do whatever Trump wants them to do, basically. They're going to, they're basically a cult and cucks for Trump, even if it costs us trillions of dollars and, our economy, basically. Our economy was already in the shitter before this war, and it's getting worse. So the good news is gas prices, it's down to 90 a barrel instead of 110 a barrel. But if you guys haven't seen this interview with one of Trump's cabinet secretaries, I can't remember which secretary, but it's interesting to watch. This is pretty much how all Americans feel right now, so let's get into it.
Let's take a listen.
I'm a waiter at a local restaurant in Queens, a full-time college student who sleeps an average of 4 hours a night and is still thousands in debt. How is a war in a country half the world away, funded by the taxes pulled from my check, helping me in any way?
Yeah, guys, go ahead and answer that in the comments if you have an answer for that. How is a war in Iran, who had no nuclear weapons, was no threat to the U.S.? Yes, they were a threat to Israel, but we're not Israel. We give Israel plenty of bombs and money to take care of themselves, more than we should. How is that helping us in the U.S. with people who can't afford to buy houses, can't afford to buy gas for their car now, groceries?
Yeah, it's Look, it's
Hello,
a valid
Blade.
and it's a tough question. I know for certain if we just look at
And he gives a word salad bullshit answer, but I'll let you hear it for yourself.
the things the president has put in place in terms of housing and big corporations that are buying up whole neighborhoods, the tax cuts that he extended with the big beautiful bill.
The tax
energy
cuts are for
policies that he's
billionaires
putting in place to not
and
only make
millionaires.
us, self-sufficient, but to you know, lessen these dependencies and lower prices, even lowering prescription drug prices. The president's absolutely focused on what you're seeing day in and day out that's affecting your pocketbook. At the same time, as commander-in-chief, he has to weigh the risks.
Is the president focused on what we're seeing day in and day out? He's a billionaire who's never had to drive a car in his life, never had to pay for anything that he worked for in his life. So how can you make the argument that Trump putting 100% of his attention in Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Panama, all these places, Greenland, how can you argue that he's 100% paying attention to affordability for everyday Americans like us, you, me, and 25 people watching the show? Go ahead and subscribe if you're new.
And make the tough decisions, facing some hard truths. We cannot have a world with a genocidal terroristic regime that holds not only your generation but the next generation hostage with nuclear weapons. And
okay, that's a lie. The Iranians are nowhere near having nuclear weapons. The Iranians were in a deal with us to stop making nuclear weapons that Trump got rid of in his first term. First thing he did, and he mostly did it because he's an idiot and he doesn't trust Obama.
those are the tough.
He does not trust Obama. He doesn't like Obama, so he's trying to overturn anything Obama did because Obama made fun of him once at like some correspondence dinner or something. Look it up.
Calls that the American people elected him to make, and I can tell you, having worked very closely with him, he doesn't back off his red.
American people elected him to not go to war. That was his number one platform thing, not going to war and immigration. And he's fucked up both royally.
Lines, and he doesn't enter us into bad deals. But those are tough decisions.
He doesn't enter us into bad deals. How about this whole war?
Yeah, how do we all feel having listened to that? Well, how's that waiter feel? How's that guy feel? The guy who's thousands of dollars in debt and now getting crushed. Man, he's like, how exactly does this affect my life? That's a great question. And that's why I always love the town halls. People have a real way of just getting right down to it.
Yeah.
And every American should be asking that question right now of this administration and specifically of the Iran war. You could not care, you could check out, but you're still gonna have to pay more at the gas price. I wish Joe Biden fell.
If you guys don't know who you're watching there, that's Sagar and Jetty. He's a right-wing pundit on the show Breaking Points, which I recommend you all watch if you want straight up good news. It's Crystal Ball, who's a total leftist progressive, and Sagar and Jetty. He's not MAGA, but he's far right. I mean, he used to be farther right, but now he's, like anybody with a half a brain, he's anti-Trump because Trump is in it. Trump is embezzling billions of dollars for him and his family, and he's starting wars, costing the rest of us whatever savings or retirement accounts we had. Trump is costing us that now, and while him and his family, Barron Trump's never gonna have to work a day in his life, and his other sons and his daughter never did work a day in their life. I don't care what you say, starting a clothing business when you already have billions of dollars is not work.
About the hard way during the Ukraine war. So,
And not only him, by the way, I mean, when inflation spiked around the world, basically it was like a total global sweep down of almost every incumbent. I mean, it was a massive global referendum on that, that inflation. And that all started with gas prices. I'm thinking about that gentleman in particular. He's talking about he's a waiter, right? So probably, tips are a significant part of his income. This is somebody who would have seen a benefit from the no tax on tips provision.
Okay, so this no tax on tips things, if anybody's ever worked a tip job like myself, you don't claim most of your tips. unless people in a restaurant paying a credit card, but back in the 90s when I worked a tip job, I don't know about now. Back in the 90s when I worked a tip job, tips were all cash. Even me now, when I tip, I prefer to tip in cash than tip on my credit card. So I don't think many people are saving too much tax money with tip jobs unless they have tip jobs where all the tips are on credit cards. I don't know. What do you think? Go ahead and comment about that. Do you work a tip job? Hello, my name is Yu J. Muse. I'm a board representative of the American Gay Society. We're having an event in Hollywood next week. I think you'd be the perfect spokesman. Can I book your reservation? I have nothing against homosexuals, but I will not be in California. I'm halfway across the world right now.
It's very likely that President Trump
I
signed
know
into
you're
law.
probably just
You know,
joking.
there's some other tax provisions. They were really
Some
counting
kid
on
on your, some
that would
fat
be
kid
like,
on
oh,
your
this is
mom's
gonna be our
couch
sales
joking
pitch.
around.
Pitch
But
people are going to get more money back from the government when they file their taxes. Obviously, that's going on right now. You know, my parents are getting like a senior credit that I'm sure Sagar was really excited about having
Okay,
credit
MAGA.
to the tax code. But now that money, that's going right back out the door and into your gas tank. And that's just the beginning. Because of course, you know, with our economy structured the way it is, that fuels inflation across the board. And, you know, I hope that gas prices come down a little bit this week. But the other dynamic that we experienced during the, you know, Ukraine war and COVID inflationary spikes is that they're very quick to raise the prices. Takes a little bit longer to bring them back down. They like to hold them high as long as they can get away with it. So I have no doubt we'll see that dynamic here play out as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, remember, diesel came down. Did anybody's grocery price come down? Because I haven't seen it. All right. Let's go to. But I know people like my McDonald's updates. My wife wanted McDonald's. I went to McDonald's yesterday. Medium fries, $4.50. $4.50.
That's great.
It might. What should that cost you? To me, 99 cents.
I give it $2.
Maybe it's been the 90s.
You know, man, I give it $2.
Okay, I don't need McDonald's. So it's one of those things where this is literally my only. And yes, I did use the app for all the people who got mad at me for not using the app. $4.50. $4.50 for a medium fry.
That's Trump's America. $4.50 for
I have the
fries.
luxury of you know, being able to take a principled stand against the app, but I am against the app because they will track you, they will hunt you down, and demand you go and eat a sausage biscuit or something.
I used it one time.
I don't need that kind of temptation
And
in my
now
life.
all of a sudden it's just like, hey, you want free sausage? You know, you want free?
Okay, guys, I encourage you to go watch those guys yourselves if you're interested in seeing more of Sagar and Crystal. They give you the straight up news. Stay off of CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. It's all bullshit. They're all just corporate hacks. You know, they'll talk about stuff as long as it doesn't affect the corporations that they work for. You know, they'll talk about Trump and, you know, CBS won't anymore because his friends bought CBS and TikTok and all that stuff. You know, the Ellison family, another family of oligarch billionaires who are trying to take over all the propaganda in the country. Okay, so let's see what they're saying about this stuff on X this morning. U.S. economy, follow. Sure, I'll follow that. If Iran forces the Gulf to abandon the petrodollar for food security, the U.S. economy will face total collapse. I've been seeing this guy, this professor, all over the place.
Is that the GCC nations of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE now are forced to pay a ransom to Iran because they supply the world with their oil for the Jet Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil flows to the Jet Hormuz, but in return they get food. So the GCC nation import anywhere from 80 to 90% of their food from overseas. And so basically the center of gravity shifts from the petrodollar to whatever financial system that Iran wants to focus on. It could be BRICS, it could be gold, it could be anything. But remember, the problem with that is that the U.S. economy is a Ponzi scheme. It's dependent on the GCC investing in AI, in tech stocks, in startups like Uber, in order to finance the U.S. economy. If this financing stops, then the U.S. economy could face collapse. And this means that these young men could cannot afford their OnlyFans anymore, and this could lead to a revolution in the streets. So the consequences for America would be dire if America were to retreat from the Middle East.
Yeah, that professor guy, he's been all over the place lately. Knows a lot about Middle East politics. Break-in. Trump economic advisor Kevin Hassert just said the quiet part out loud. If the war were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy at all. It wouldn't hurt consumers. But that's really the last of our concerns right now. They don't care about us at all. He's so full of shit. It wouldn't hurt the consumers. It's already hurting the consumers, you idiot.
And that if it were to be extended, it wouldn't really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about, if that continued, what we would have to do about that. But that's like really the last of our concerns right now, because we're very confident that this thing is going ahead of schedule.
They're all millionaires, so consumers are the last of their concerns. Absolute bombshell. The U.S. Treasury Secretary admits on live TV that they are unsanctioning Russian and Iranian oil just to manipulate global prices and save their own economy after starting a disastrous war. The hypocrisy in Washington.
Effort. We had a break the glass plan across the administration and in Treasury. We unsanctioned Russian oil. We knew that there were about 130 million barrels on the water, and we created supply that is beyond the Straits of Hormuz. So we anticipated this. We knew that there could be temporary, and I want.
Guys, that's total bullshit. If they anticipated it, they would have done something about it ahead of time. So just if you don't understand what he's saying there, they're letting the Russians sell their oil so they could keep oil flowing throughout the world economy. But, the Russians are making premium money off that oil to keep their economy going so they could keep buying missiles and oppressing their own people and attacking us. This is how stupid this war is, how unplanned it was. And if you don't know how stupid Donald Trump is by now, you need some help.
To emphasize temporary choke point there, and there was 130 million barrels of floating storage. In the coming days, we may unsanction the Iranian oil that's on the water. It's about 140 million barrels, so depending on how you count it,
140 million barrels is like 1 day's worth of oil for the world.
that's 10 days to 2 weeks of supply that the Iranians had been pushing out. That would have all gone to China. In essence, we will be using the Iranian barrels against the Iranians to keep the price down for the next.
Oh, glorious! Glorious! We're going to release the Iranian sanctions so that we actually hurt the Iranians is a fantastic gambit. Masterful gambit, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, you know what?
I couldn't have said it better myself than Hassan there. That's total fucking bullshit. Spin. This guy is a total hack. He should not be in government. The Treasury Secretary is a billionaire who never earned anything, was born rich, just like all the Nepo babies in Congress and in the government right now. Absolute insanity. A U.S. general goes on live TV and casually details they plan to invade Karg Island with airborne rangers, strangle Iran's economy, and intentionally trigger a civil war. They are openly plotting the destruction of a sovereign nation. That won't work. The Mearsheimer guy knows what he's talking about. He's a civil Middle Eastern historian. Absolute bombshell. Mearsheimer reveals Trump secretly allowed Iran to sell its oil to keep global prices under $100, but Israel intentionally bombed Iranian gas fields to ruin the plan, sending prices skyrocketing and destroying the U.S. economy.
I think
think it's hugely significant. And I think the fact that President Trump issued this post where he made it clear how angry he was at the Israelis for doing this is evidence of that. Look, President Trump is doing everything he can to keep oil prices under $100 a barrel. And that is not easy to do. Off Russian oil, and he has allowed Iran to sell its oil. It's very important to understand that Iran is selling its oil on world markets. Iran has been allowed to send oil through the Strait of Hormuz. And the reason that Trump is allowing this is because he wants all the oil he could possibly get in the world oil markets. And he's been quite successful, at least, at keeping the price of a barrel down under slightly less than $100. Well, what happened yesterday when the Israelis hit this natural gas field in Iran, and then the Iranians retaliated first against Qatar, and now apparently they're attacking Saudi Arabian sites as well, is that the price of a barrel of oil is going up. I saw it was up around $115 this morning. This is disastrous for the United States and for the world economy. And if things continue to escalate, which is a real possibility, the economic situation will only get worse. So what happened yesterday really mattered. And that, again, is why President Trump made it clear to the Israelis, don't ever do this again.
So if you guys haven't been paying attention the last few days, you know, that's oil went up, it came back down today because Trump said if the Iranians didn't surrender or whatever, he was going to take out all their electrical grid, which is a war crime. It's against the Geneva Convention. But of course, he tacoed and backed down when people told him that if he did that, or Iran told him if he did that, they were going to take out all the electrical grid of Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. And that, you know, Trump's friends who are financing all his companies and his crypto ventures out there and giving his son-in-law billions of dollars to run, you know, wealth funds that make him wealthy more than anybody else, not helping our country at all. So Trump tacoed, and this morning, oil prices dropped a little again to about $90 a barrel. That still means $4 in gas for you and me. You know, it's still $1 higher than it was, and it's probably going to be that, remain that for the rest of the year unless Trump does something drastic. But yeah, that's what Mershon was. That's a day old, that news. That's what he's talking about. If you guys are new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Let's keep going on X here, see what's going on with the economy. The ultimate vulnerability of the American empire exposed. The U.S. will be forced to abandon the war in Iran, not because of military defeat, but because skyrocketing gas prices will completely destroy the U.S. economy.
At some point, the Israelis, the Americans, and the Iranians will think it's not in their interest to continue. And we don't know when that point is. For us in the United States, it's when the economy and the price of gas gets to such a level that it becomes almost impossible, given the hostile media and the propaganda that's coming from the left. This is a disaster, that Donald Trump cannot win the midterms, and therefore the entire MAGA agenda will be inert in the next 2.5 years. If that starts to crystallize, then he will probably say, we've done enough, and we now turn it over to the Iranian people. At some point, the Israelis,
Everyone worried about oil at $200 a barrel. $100 for the rest of the year puts the U.S. in inflation with negative GDP growth, and the follow-through effects would linger for 2 to 3 years because of lagging input costs. 1 year of this war will cost the U.S. economy more than the previous decades in the Middle East. Numbers, numbers, numbers. Here's Kevin Hassett, Lion Hassett. If the war were to be extended, it would really disrupt the U.S. economy very much at all. It wouldn't disrupt the U.S. economy. It would hurt consumers, and we'd have to think about what we'd have to do about that. Wouldn't hurt the economy, just consumers. Wouldn't hurt me, I'm rich. Just hurt the consumers. U.S. trading Bitcoin. Big short investor Michael Burry warns. You see that movie, The Big Short? This was the guy played by Batman. Chris, what's his name? I can't remember his name. U.S. financial markets and economy will crash. The problem is too big to save. The Economist defense editor exposes a massive cover-up. He reveals the UK government and NATO secretly believe the war in Iran is a needless, harmful disaster, destroying the global economy, but are publicly lying to support the US. Absolute cynical diplomacy. Yeah, I mean, it's well known that the UK will always lie to support the US because they're, cucks to the US. The U.S. has completely lost control of this war. It is no longer just the entire global economy are now dragged into the crossfire. Experts warn any peace deal could take months to negotiate.
Very narrow, and that's why probably everyone right now is trying to bring both sides back to a level where there's a possibility to start a kind of a framework, for example, from the Strait of Hormuz. This could be an idea to start with, and it seems that there are attempts in this regard, but how would this be reflected on the ground? How would this be demonstrated? This is the big question, because the Iranians and the Americans currently aren't alone in this war. There is Israel too, and there is Hezbollah in Lebanon too, and there is the regional players, mainly the Gulf states who were in the middle of this crossfire for the past 3 weeks. And there is also the international or the global economy too. So
the economic devastation is already locked in. Even if the war ends today, experts predict months of global oil disruption, billions in damage to Qatari gas facilities, and massive supply chain chaos. The U.S. economy is going to feel this for a very long time. Yep. Let's see what's going on Reddit today. Kind of low.
The world, the Middle East, our ungrateful allies in Europe, even segments of our own press
Pete Hegseth is a
should be
fucking
saying one
joke.
thing to President Trump. Thank you.
Shut up, you fucking dumbass. My favorite Reddit feed. Leopards ate my face. Florida man who voted for Trump wants to work something out with Trump after ICE snatched his wife and deported her back to Venezuela while she was in the process of getting her papers done. Says, let's work something out. Please, man, let me keep my wife. She deserves to be here. What cracks me up about these guys is these people who write these on Truth Social, these comments to Trump. Trump doesn't give a shit. He doesn't read your Truth Socials. He can fucking care less. You already voted for him. He can't be president again. He doesn't care about you. Get it through your fucking red hat head. This sad Florida man who voted for Trump wants to work something out with Donald Trump after ICE snatched up his wife. He's a fucking idiot. It's freedom from my religion. Islamic school is funded by us. Women just exposed taxpayers will now pay a $10,000 per Muslim child to attend an Islamic school in Texas. Texas has now admitted for Islamic schools to their voucher, admitted for Islamic schools to their voucher program. That's not grammatically correct, but this comes after Barack Obama appointed judge ruled that they had to extend their deadline to allow more private schools, mainly Islamic schools, to apply. This comes after CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which has been designated or labeled as a terror organization by Governor Abbott in the state of Texas, by lunatic Governor Abbott, racist lunatic Governor Abbott, in the state of Texas. This comes after they filed a lawsuit demanding taxpayer funds for these Islamic schools. They sued to make us pay them. We now have to pay them to run their indoctrination centers. This is not how this is supposed to go. We need a federal designation of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. We need the federal designation, and we need to get very serious about countering these threats right here in the homeland, because I'm going to tell you that's what I voted for. Okay, I bet this is not. Victory for religious freedom. Indiana school district forced to pay $650,000 to Christian teacher over pronoun mandate. In a major win for teachers who refuse to be compelled to speak against their faith, Brownsburg Community School Corporation in Indiana has agreed to pay former orchestra teacher John Kluge $650,000 to settle his religious discrimination lawsuit. Back in, I don't know why we have to read that. Okay. I already heard this. It's pretty funny. Apparently I'm an idiot. 3-time Trump vote in Pennsylvania sounds off on Iran war. Tim Bubb, a Republican county commissioner, complains on PBS about the manufacturing boom that didn't materialize in his Ohio county. Also Bubb, and that's okay if it's someone else, but it isn't something else. In Licking County's case, it's us and it's Ohio. This can't be more disappointing. Just like MAGA and right-wingers, once it affects them, it's a problem. Intel promised 5,000 jobs in construction. We're seeing less than half that, I guess Intel, the chip maker, and 3,000 permanent jobs to man those two plants and manufacture silicon chips. Frankly, I think that's overpromised and under-delivered, as they say. Paul Sullivan, Licking County Commissioner, Tim Bubb, where the Intel project is located. Is it an unrealistic expectation that we're going to have lots more manufacturing and jobs in this county than we used to? Tim Bubb, well, I'm not going to go as far as unrealistic, but you don't want to be overly optimistic. We're still an expensive labor market. We have competitors around the world. It's a world market now in Asia and other places that have been pretty damn competitive in manufacturing and shipping to this country. Okay, more leopards ate their face.
There's a lot about the job.
Trump voter begged for deportations. Now ICE is taking his workers and he's going broke. Yeah, I think that's a video. I saw that maybe. Yeah, if you guys watch my video from the other day, you'll see the video that this guy made. Okay guys, I decided I'm gonna start ending these videos with some funny stuff, so let's check this out. Have you guys heard of Clavicular, the right wing?
This girl was caught cheating on Clavicular's live stream. She saw the famous streamer in the club, so she did everything in her power to get his attention. When he left the club, she followed him like a
This is the streamer that won't vote for JD Vance because his head is not the right ratio. Like it's too fat, basically. That's how, you know, inauthentic and focused on looks and everything these, you know, Gen Z is, maybe, I don't
groupie
know.
until he decided to invite her into his bus. However, when she got on the bus, she started panicking about the camera being on.
Wait, this live stream?
No.
Here's a good looking kid, I'll give him that.
So it's not gonna be like on a YouTube video?
If you don't want it to be.
I don't want it to be.
Okay, we got you.
Okay, I really don't want it to be.
We don't have that many seats, so you guys can.
I can't be in the YouTube video. Wait, I cannot go watch.
Well, you're in the other person.
No, I sure hope you're not.
Is that not what you got one for?
No, I just don't want to go it.
However, by the time they arrived to his home, Clavicular's fans already found her Instagram and exposed her.
She's cheating on her boyfriend? Oh, I guessed. Are you kidding me? Let's get her out of here.
So this girl was just looking for internet fame and she hooked up with Clavicular and he put it on video and her boyfriend saw it. Oops.
Make sure we don't go to war against Iran, which would be a profound mistake for our country. So that's a really, really important thing. Maybe drill domestically. Ukraine, you'll see gas prices go down to $30 a barrel. What does that mean? Dollars, that's what it means. Make sure we
So this is Charlie Kirk, the right-wing savior. Let's watch that again.
don't go to war against Iran, which would be a profound mistake for our country. So that's a really, really important thing. Maybe drill domestically. Peace in the Middle East, peace with Russia, Ukraine. You'll see gas prices go down to $30 a barrel. What does that mean? $1.75 a gallon. That's what it means. Right? Make sure we don't go to war against Iran.
So he's talking about supporting Trump there, promising $1.75 a gallon gas. And I mean, he's dead now, so. Okay. Let's see what other fun stuff we have on TikTok today.
I'm gonna be honest. Everything you've said up here sounds really disingenuous and one-sided. Where were you when Joe Biden's inflation raised to 9%? Where were you when Joe Biden's gas prices were $8 and $9? Where were you when the middle class was forced to stay inside and was forced to shut their businesses, and the richer got richer and the poor got poorer? That was the real disparity there. And now you're sitting here complaining 9-10 months into a presidency about how he hasn't done what he's promised. Give the man a break. We just came out of the worst economy that's ever existed.
2.7% was the inflation rate, the night of the presidential election. Is that the worst the economy that you've ever seen?
What do you mean say that again?
On the night of the presidential election, the inflation rate in this country was 2.7%.
So does that just take away the fact that it got to 9% in 2021 and 2022?
First off,
You know, these people, they conveniently forget that we were in a pandemic. I mean, I don't like Joe Biden. Let me get that out of the way real quick. I would have 100% preferred Bernie Sanders. In all the primaries, I went out of my way to vote for Bernie Sanders. And then the Democratic National Committee, you know, they did sneaky things to get Bernie Sanders out of that because they're afraid if he gets in the general election, he's going to win. And that's not good for the left or the right or the blue or the red, because it's not blue and red and left and right. It's the 1% against the 99%. That's what it is.
Your point.
First off, I'm not here to defend everything under Joe Biden.
No, but I am.
But what I am here to say is that when inflation was high, that was a result of the pandemic, and he brought that down to 2.7%. So you inherited,
in the last year,
you inherited an economy.
So 3 years was
inflation
absolutely
was substantially lower, and as a result, you guys ran a cold campaign saying that you were going to reduce it lower than the 2.7%. That did not happen.
But it's happening. In fact,
is it? Is inflation going down?
Well, actually, what's crazy is the
inflation going down?
The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, just said that we've taken in more money.
Is inflation going down?
Let me finish my comment. Jerome Powell said that the tariffs have brought in so much money.
Is inflation
we're
going
actually
down?
in a surplus. It will.
Inflation is going down?
It's not.
Anybody think that their grocery prices are going down?
Actually, chicken did just go down. Why? Because Trump thought that they were.
And beef prices are near all-time highs.
I'm going to be honest. Everything.
Professor, thank you very much for doing this. We've never met. I don't know a great deal about you, but I have seen a number of your videos in which you make remarkably accurate predictions. So that's what I know about you, and I'm impressed by that, by your ability to call events before they happen. So with that in mind, let me ask you, where do you think this war in Iran is going? How will it be resolved, and what are the consequences likely to be?
Well, thanks so much for inviting me to talk. I'm a huge fan. I'm on your work for a number of years now.
Thank you.
So I think that this war in Iran will be very similar to the war in Ukraine, meaning that this will be drawn out, be a war of attrition. Neither side will concede defeat, even though it is in the best interest to reach a ceasefire. And this will have dramatic consequences on the global economy. And this war could drag on for years and years. Already we're seeing major repercussions on the global economy in that flights are being canceled. In Southeast Asia, they're running out of fuel, so they're asking people to stay at home. And in a few more months, experts are predicting a food shortage, meaning that nations will be forced into food rationing. And today, there's a major escalation in that the Israelis struck the largest gas field in Iran. And Iran retaliated by attacking energy infrastructure of the GCC. And Iran has stated that its purpose, its goal, its strategy is to move oil to $200 a barrel, which will have will really significant impact on the global economy, because the entire global economy is based on access to cheap energy. So unfortunately, I think that we can expect this war to drag on for years and years. Eventually, America will send in ground troops. Eventually, the Strait of Hormuz will be contested. Eventually, this will spread all across the world. Eventually, other nations will be drawn in. So Saudi Arabia is thinking about declaring war on Iran, and Saudi Arabia has a mutual defense pact with Pakistan. So Pakistan will be drawn into this war. So things are spiraling out of control. And just recently, Ali Larijani, who was the de facto head of the Iranian war effort, was assassinated. And he was a pragmatic elder statesman in Iran who had the authority to negotiate a ceasefire. Now that he's gone, there really is no more off-ramp. So both sides are committed to a long war of attrition, and the consequences for the entire global economy are quite dire.
That is, I wouldn't say that's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would include a nuclear strike by one or more actors and the destruction of the Aqsa Mosque complex in Jerusalem, which would spark a religious war. So that's as bad as it could get, but you've just described one step before the worst, which is protracted, destructive, impossible to stop. So my question is, because there are so many global players, big global players, the US and China, I think, who would be hurt by this, why is there not an incentive to get it settled quickly, and why can't that happen?
Right. So once this war starts, it achieves a momentum and logic of its own. So
this is not my first recession, so I'm going to explain the Circuit City grift to you, okay? If you're under 35, you don't know about this one, okay? There was a store, a national chain back in the day called Circuit City. It was just like Best Buy. It was basically the same store, but instead of their color being blue, their color was red, all right? It was called Circuit City. It went out of business one day. It went out of business. And it was right around the time of the Great Recession, so all of my friends had gaps in employment, they had all these other issues, and they were stuck in entry-level positions. They couldn't move up in anything. So what did they do? They all got together, and they started covering each other's resumes that each of them had worked at different positions at Circuit City. Now, it wasn't, did they ever actually work there? No. They've been a busboy for the last 5 years? Yes. But now on paper, they were a floor manager at Circuit City. Boom. They got more money. Oh, actually, I was the director of procurement for Circuit City. Boom. Nobody could prove otherwise. There was no HR department to call. There was...
That's an old video. I don't know if you've seen that one before, but basically it goes on to say that you know, they used Circuit City because it was out of business and nobody could cross-reference check. And I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Do not fucking move that gun!
Today's case occurred in San Marcos, California.
Could you put a percentage on the chance of this actually happening, the good news that you just gave us?
100%. And the reason why I'm saying that is that nothing's ever 100%. I shouldn't have said that, but I'm very confident. And the reason why is this Strait of Hormuz thing is going to spin out of control. Trump can only lie.
It is. It's currently spinning out of
When the
control.
Iranians first shut it down, we saw Brent spike to $115 a barrel. Then Trump came out and lied, and it brought it down to 81. But now the fact is, the U.S. Navy said we can't escort ships. And we said, we'll blow up all their mines. Well, they don't use ships to mine them. Nobody's sailing through the strait, and no one's going to be sailing through the strait. And the United States can threaten to bomb and bomb and bomb, but we know that the bombing's not doing anything because all we're doing is blowing up empty buildings. And there's going to be a crunch in a week's time. You're going to see the global energy market go, there's no solution there. There is no alternative. We've got nothing. And prices are going to go crazy. When the Americans start paying, because, right here, already
So I watched this about a week ago, and he's kind of right. In a week's time, prices are getting out of control, especially fuel prices, but everything else is going up too. So we'll see where this goes. Let's turn to the Epstein files now.
The Epstein files released last year showed pictures of Jeffrey Epstein hanging out with former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, but the latest batch reveals a far more personal relationship between these two men. In hundreds of text messages and emails between them, their relationship and close friendship is apparent, including in this text exchange from July 6, 2019. In those messages, Bannon and Epstein discuss getting together the following day, but when Bannon proposes a time, Epstein abruptly calls off their plans, writing, quotes, all canceled. Epstein had been arrested by federal authorities for sex trafficking minors. Bannon first met Epstein after the 2016 election, according to journalist Michael Wolff in his 2019 book, Siege, Trump Under Fire. Wolff wrote that Bannon, the architect of Trump's improbable win, told Epstein, quote, you were the one person I was truly afraid of coming forward during the campaign. Epstein grew deeply invested in Bannon's attempts to spread right-wing populism all over the globe, offering contacts, advice, and access to his plane. Bannon, meanwhile, seemed eager to take advantage of his new friends. One point in July 2018, he asked him in a text message, quote, do you know anyone in Europe that wants to control the European Parliament and with it the EU? At times, Epstein and Bannon reflected on their consequential partnership. Like when they had overlapping interests in Israel, Epstein wrote to Bannon, quote, now you can understand why Trump wakes up in the middle of the night sweating when he hears you and I are friends. Before publishing the story, I reached out to Steve Bannon for comment, and he did not respond. The Epstein files...
Of course he didn't. So, comment. Steve Bannon is the reason Trump got elected his first time. Yeah, that's true. How I didn't even know who Steve was before this week and I voted Trump. I don't know how. You need to maybe do more research or something. Take note. The date. Did you miss him going to jail for contempt of court in 2024? He was in the news a lot. He was me one who crafted He was the one who crafted. Hold on, let me see. He was the one who crafted flooding the zone with nonsense so folks set up the propaganda because they aren't sure what's true and not true. Yes, he worked closely with Trump during the 2016 campaign as well as the other campaigns. Please research before you vote. Yes, please research before you vote. Trump is shivering. No, he's not. Who did you think rattled these guys out? Not Trump. His not. Okay.
The Epstein files released last year show.
His what is not what? Can you talk about Bill Clinton? Sure, Bill Clinton has made it very clear who cares about Bill Clinton. Trump being real quiet. How my jaw didn't drop. Bannon is still his advisor. Shocker not. All besties. That's true. Been knowing this for a week. Bannon wasn't hanging out, he interviewed him. Bannon is scum. Bannon most certainly hung out with Epstein. They were very close friends. It's very well documented. How come not seeing any new interviews with him on TikTok? That's a huge misquote from Wolf. Misquote, I think they meant misquote from Wolf. Bannon doesn't say that. It's so shocking. I find it odd that there's no documentation of Bannon with anyone. How could this be? Okay, enough of that.
The Epstein files aren't the end game. They are a distraction. While we're focused on those names in the documents, the people who actually own the system are laughing because the real crime didn't happen on an island in the Caribbean. It happened on an island in Georgia. In this episode, we'll cover the Jekyll Island takeover that privatized the American dollar and the truth about 2008, where the collapse of Lehman Brothers was actually a calculated consolidation of power. You won't want to miss this one. On the freezing cold night of November 22nd, 1910, a man named Frank Vanderlip stood on the concrete platform of the Hoboken Railway Terminal in New Jersey. He was clutching a shotgun case in one hand and a heavy leather suitcase in the other. He had the collar of his thick wool coat turned up high to hide his face to anyone walking past him in the station. Frank looked like a regular guy heading south for a hunting trip. But Frank wasn't normal. He was the president of the National City Bank of New York, which today is known as Citibank, and he was representing the financial interest of the Rockefeller family. Now, Frank was one of the most powerful men in America. He was terrified because, according to his own autobiography, which would be published 25 years later in the Saturday Evening Post, Frank felt, in his own words, furtive as a conspirator. He knew that if a reporter recognized him or if a photographer snapped a picture of him on this platform, it wouldn't be just a scandal. I mean, it would likely cause a stock market crash. So he just kept his head down. He walked past the main passenger cars and made his way to the very end of the platform. And there, sitting in the darkness away from the station lights, was a single private rail car with its blinds drawn tight. He walked up to the metal steps, he looked left and he looked right just to make sure he wasn't being watched, and then he climbed aboard. Now inside, the air was warm and it smelled of very expensive cigar smoke, and he walked down the narrow corridor and he entered the main cabin. And sitting there in the dim light were two other men who were dressed like hunters, but who were definitely not hunters. One was Henry Davison, a senior partner at J.P. Morgan Company. The other was Paul Warburg, a German banker who was widely considered one of the smartest financial minds in the world at the time. Frank didn't say hello, he didn't shake hands, he nodded, he put a shotgun in the rack and sat down. Now a few minutes later, the train hissed and lurched forward and it began its long journey south into the night. Now as the train was moving, a fourth man entered the cabin. This was Senator Nelson Aldrich. Now at the time, this man was the head of the National Monetary Commission and probably most politically powerful man in the United States Senate. Now, he looked at the other men and he laid down the ground rules for the trip. He told them that for the next week, they were not allowed to use their last names, period. They were only to address each other as Frank, Harry, Paul, and Nelson. And he explained that these servants on this private train car knew who Senator Aldrich was, but they didn't know who the bankers were. And if the servants heard the names, Morgan or Rockefeller or Warburg, they would talk. They would blow the lid off everything. They would tell the press. And if they found out that the most powerful politicians and most powerful bankers in America were sneaking out of New York together in the dead of night, well, the public would probably riot. They have to understand that the atmosphere in 1910, the American public absolutely hated Wall Street. They called it the money trust. They believed that the Epstein files.
So guys, this goes back to my main thesis on this channel, that billionaires and oligarchy has been conspiring against us for, since the beginning of the US. And, we push back, and they get more power, they buy congressional people, they buy senators, they buy presidents. Our current president is bought and owned by the oligarchy. So they buy all these influential people, and now they're trying to buy our right to vote. They bought the Supreme Court, and so this is my thesis with the ultra wealthy. To keep their wealth and power, they have to suppress the 99% of us. Because if we find out what's really going on, if everybody has the right to vote, if it's not just some random Tuesday in November, if it's a Saturday where everybody's off from work and everybody could easily vote by mail or whatever, that is not good for them. If the Supreme Court is free thinking and not, caught by the ultra rich, that is not good for them. They need these policies to keep their money and to keep it from being spread out amongst the populace. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. If you're still here, go ahead and subscribe, like, comment, share this video with a friend. Hit your notifications bell so whenever I go live, I'm here. And thanks for watching the SpinCycle. I'll see you next time.